This is Kurtop, bringing you 100 cases where builders accidentally discovered what scientists had sought for years. A sarcophagus sealed with lead. Budapest, Óbuda district. Regular construction work. The excavator bucket hits a stone. A Roman limestone sarcophagus has been lying here since the 3rd century AD for almost 1,700 years. Most Roman tombs found in this area have been looted. They were opened back in ancient times, turned over, emptied. Not this one. The lid is sealed with metal clamps and covered with molten lead. Now stop here for a second. Molten lead is not just a lid. To do this, you need fire. Fire, tools, time, and intention. Someone specifically stood over this tomb and thought, let it never be open. This is a conscious decision. Why? Protection from robbers is the obvious explanation, but lead seals are extremely rare. That means there was something inside that the family considered important to preserve, or important not to let out. When archaeologists from the Budapest Historical Museum finally opened the sarcophagus, they found a complete skeleton, a young woman, and next to her, 2 intact glass vessels, bronze figurines, about 140 coins, a contour ornament, a bone hairpin, and traces of fabric embroidered with gold thread. Imagine, the fabric completely decayed over 17 centuries, but the gold remained. The fine threads woven into the clothing she was buried in outlasted the Roman Empire, the Middle Ages, 2 world wars, and they waited for the excavators in Budapest. This is not just a rich burial. In the late Roman era, sarcophagi were often reused. Old coffin, new deceased, everything was simple. This one was made especially for her, for a specific person. Who was she? Unknown. No name, no inscription. 17 centuries ago, someone sealed the lid of her coffin with lead and wanted her to remain untouched forever. They almost succeeded. But here is the question that won't let us rest. If the family sealed the coffin so carefully, what were they more afraid of? That someone would get in or that someone would get out? A flooded cemetery was discovered in Egypt. Heraklion is a huge port that emerged on the coast of Egypt as early as the 8th century BC. The place was so popular among the Greeks that they even built a cemetery here. The secrets of this cemetery were uncovered thanks to modern methods of underwater archaeology. In the graves, archaeologists discovered a huge number of artifacts, including beautiful Greek pottery. Near the port, they also discovered many shrines built by the Greeks. But even more exciting is the discovery of an ancient ship. It sank in one of the canals and was hidden under a 5-meter layer of clay and silt. The discovery of the oldest nuclear reactor in the world. It's funny, but the first human-made reactor producing electricity was only created in 1951. But the rock formation at Oklo in Gabon was already generating nuclear energy 2 billion years ago. The story of the discovery began in 1972 when French scientists took a sample of uranium ore from a deposit in Gabon to test its uranium composition. And here the scientists stumbled upon an amazing discovery. The uranium sample contained less uranium-235 than usual. This meant that somewhere in the mine, about 200 kilograms of uranium-235 had disappeared. As it turned out, the missing uranium had undergone nuclear fission and split into other atoms. It turns out that nature accidentally created a nuclear reactor that operates under very specific conditions necessary for sustained energy release. And this really happened. There was enough uranium-235 in the ore to sustain the reaction. Secondly, uranium-235 naturally decays, releasing a neutron that initiates the fission process. And finally, there was enough groundwater at the reactor site to slow down the neutrons and regulate the reaction. Not an octopus, 300 million years ago. In 1988, a small fossil was extracted from a layer of rock in Illinois, unremarkable and just a bit larger than a palm. They examined it and saw 8 tentacles, fins, and a characteristic body shape. The surrounding rock is 300 million years old. This meant that octopuses appeared 150 million years earlier than science had previously thought. The article was published in 2000. Guinness added an entry for the oldest octopus on the planet. Evolution textbooks were updated, and dozens of studies on the history of cephalopod mollusks were rewritten from scratch, all based on a single unremarkable stone from Illinois. No one really paid much attention to this fossil. Then scientists from the University of Reading scanned it with a next-generation X-ray scanner. It's so powerful that it can see structures inside the stone that ordinary light could never detect. It's like an X-ray in a hospital, only 1,000 times brighter. And inside they found a small rasp with rows of teeth. It's an organ that all mollusks have without exception. An octopus has 7 or 9 teeth in each row. Here, there were 11. It wasn't an octopus, but a relative of the nautilus, a sea mollusk with a coiled shell. It has survived to this day almost unchanged, and it's sometimes called a living fossil. The creature had already partially decomposed before it fossilized, and after a few weeks of decomposition, its shape changed so much that for 25 years, everyone thought it was an octopus. The Guinness editorial team commented briefly, "The record is being removed until new evidence appears. Octopuses now appear in the history of life on Earth much later, and the whole picture of their evolution has changed from a single analysis." At the same time, the fossils from Illinois turned out to be the oldest soft tissues of a nautilus relative in the world. They broke the previous record by 220 million years at once. The mistake led to another discovery. And here is what's most alarming about this. This fossil lay in the museum for 25 years with the correct label. It was cited in serious scientific papers, and students were taught about it. How many exhibits are standing behind glass right now with the same kind of incorrect labels, and calmly waiting for a new X-ray? The tomb of the mercenary commander. We are heading to the Abusir necropolis near Cairo. The tomb we are going to study dates back to the early 5th century BC, and it is quite unusual. This is a shaft-type tomb. Here is the main character of today's video, Wahibra Marinit. This guy apparently was the commander of mercenary warriors, and it seems he died suddenly, since his tomb could not be fully completed. The amazing double sarcophagus found in the depths of this shaft is oriented from east to west. The outer sarcophagus is made of massive blocks of white limestone, while the inner one is made of basalt, covered with ancient spells from the Book of the Dead. These spells were meant to help the deceased make the journey to the afterlife. Unfortunately, the tomb was looted back in ancient times, and all that archaeologists managed to find were 2 amulets, a heart scarab and a headrest for the mummy. According to the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians, they helped the spirit of the deceased maintain clarity of mind in the afterlife. Interestingly, some burial items that remained after the looting were also found: faience figurines, vessels for incense, and fragments of the Book of the Dead. So friends, it seems that Wahibra Marinit was quite an important person. Lipstick from the Bronze Age. In the southeast of Iran, archaeologists have discovered perhaps the oldest lipstick in human history. The find is about 3,500 years old. It was a small stone vial made of the mineral chlorite, in which remnants of the cosmetic product were preserved. It turns out they aimed for bright red, shiny, and fragrant lips. The base of the lipstick is hematite powder, a red iron ore that changes color from black to blood red when ground. Additionally, other minerals were used: braunite, manganite, rhodonite, and galena, which gave the desired shade and shine. Together, they made up about 80% of the composition, mixed with plant wax. Finally, aromatic plant fibers and tiny quartz particles were added to the lipstick so that the lips not only gained color but also smelled pleasant and shimmered in the sunlight. Scientists believed that the elongated shape of the bottle was convenient for use, together with a bronze mirror held in the other hand. This can be confirmed, for example, by the Turin Papyrus number 55001 from Egypt, which dates back to the 12th century BC. There, a woman is coloring her lips or eyes using a small brush, a brush in one hand, a mirror in the other. A Tyrannosaurus's grandfather on the shelf, 74 million years old. In a museum storeroom in New Mexico, a nearly 1 meter long bone gathered dust for 7 years, a tibia, heavy, with a distinctive curve that any paleontologist would recognize at first glance. It was lying in a box with an inventory number among hundreds of others just like it, and no one really paid much attention to it. Because in places like that, there are thousands of bones, and at some point it all just becomes background. Paleontologist Nicholas Longrich from the University of Bath picked it up, and something didn't add up. The rock from which the bone was extracted was dated at 74 million years old, while the classic Tyrannosaurus rex lived 66 million years ago. That's an 8 million year difference. It's like finding a smartphone in a geological layer where there should only be keypad phones. Everything looks familiar, but something is fundamentally off. When Longrich started calculating, the numbers were even more interesting. The bone is only 16% shorter than the corresponding bone in Sioux, the largest known Tyrannosaurus skeleton. And recalculating the proportions gave a weight of 4.7 tons. That means this animal was 50% heavier than any of its contemporaries. To grasp the scale, take an ordinary Tyrannosaurus from a textbook and mentally add half of its own weight on top of it. That's what stood in the southwest of North America 8 million years before T-Rex even appeared on the scene. Longrich says it directly. This is an exact copy of Tyrannosaurus. If this bone had been found in the same layers as the classic T-Rex, no one would have doubted what it was. But it was found earlier. And this overturns one of the most persistent beliefs in dinosaur science. Until now, it was believed that the ancestors of tyrannosaurs came from Asia. But several large and very ancient forms are concentrated specifically in the southwest of North America, millions of years before T-Rex appeared further north, in Montana and Canada. The picture comes together on its own. The king of dinosaurs grew up here. Asia has nothing to do with it. Until there is a complete skeleton, there is no name. Longrich continues the excavations and is hoping above all for teeth. They are preserved in stone better than large bones. But the main thing has already happened. The bones sat on a shelf for 7 years, ignored by everyone. And all this time, it contained a story that rewrites the origin of the most famous predator in the entire history of life on Earth. How many such stories are still lying in boxes with inventory numbers? Ruins of ancient civilizations. Captain Robert Scott and his team came face to face with an ancient civilization beyond the icy wall of Antarctica. They found traces from before the flood and even filmed them on camera. Can you imagine what it's like to see the ruins of an ancient city, pyramids, columns, and statues in the very center of Antarctica? This ancient civilization might even be older than those we learn about in school. The proof is a map from 1531 where Antarctica is shown without ice. It's strange because according to our history, Antarctica was only discovered in 1820 by Russian explorers. Did you know that the North and South Poles have switched places 171 times over the last 76 million years? And the last time this happened was about 12,000 years ago. That explains why all the secrets of Antarctica are now hidden under a kilometer-thick layer of ice. According to recent reports, there is a huge network of passages and tunnels under Antarctica at a depth of 4 kilometers. Iron spheres on the ocean floor. The German research vessel Zone, in the waters of the Atlantic, set out to search for marine creatures between South America and Africa, but stumbled upon something completely different. On the ocean floor, they discovered dozens, hundreds, thousands of metal spheres, each the size of a bowling ball. It was the largest deposit of manganese spheres ever found in the Atlantic Ocean. Manganese spheres, which often look like pancakes, can be found in every ocean, but the largest ones are in the Pacific. These spheres in the Atlantic were special. They were round, which is completely unusual. Scientists think that these spheres formed over millions of years, growing by 1 centimeter every million years. The largest of them, which are 10 million years old, lie at a depth of 55,500 meters. Spiny dragon, 125 million years old. In northeastern China, paleontologists uncovered another dinosaur skeleton and stopped. Skin appeared under the brush. Not a faint imprint in the stone, not a blurred outline, but real fossilized skin covered with spikes. The dinosaur belonged to a group of herbivores that scientists have been studying for almost 200 years, and which has long been considered one of the best studied in paleontology. In 2 centuries of discoveries, no spikes have ever been seen in this group, not in a single species. Here the spikes were of different sizes all over the body, and the tail was additionally covered with overlapping scales, like tiles on a roof,
слой за слоем, назвали
making it officially a spiny dragon. But the main sensation isn't the spikes themselves. Scientists examined the skin under a powerful microscope and got down to individual cells, the very ones that make up the spikes, after 125 million years underground. For comparison, the spikes were made of the same material as our nails and hair. Under normal conditions, this material would break down in just a few decades. In human burials, it disappears completely. For it to survive 125 million years, the initial circumstances had to be absolutely perfect. In the first moments after the animal died, the right soil, the right temperature, the right rate of burial in sediment. Thousands of other dinosaurs with the equally interesting skin simply dissolved without a trace. We were lucky with this one. Scientists haven't yet determined why a herbivore would need spikes. Maybe it's for protection from predators. Maybe it's for regulating body temperature. Some dinosaurs used large growths on their backs for this purpose. Maybe it's for sensing the world around them. There's nothing to compare it to. Nothing like this has been found before. This group has been studied for nearly 200 years, and now suddenly, a species that shouldn't exist, with skin that shouldn't have been preserved. Write in the comments how many more secrets like this you think are still buried underground, and subscribe so you don't miss it when they find the next one. The first dog? 14,000 years ago, the Ice Age. Northern Europe is covered in ice. People live in small groups. They hunt. They constantly move following the animals. No cities, no agriculture. Every day is a matter of survival. And in this world, someone had a dog. Researchers from 17 scientific institutions conducted a DNA analysis of a bone fragment found in Gough's Cave in Somerset, England. They compared it with a database of more than 1,000 modern and ancient dogs and wolves. The result is clear. It's not a wolf, it's a domestic dog. The dating is 14,300 years BC. This is the earliest direct evidence of dog domestication in Britain. The previous record was 5 years younger in one leap. Dr. William Marsh from the London Museum of Natural History said it directly. These early domestic dogs were almost indistinguishable from wolves in appearance. No cute face, no floppy ears. It was a creature the size of a large shepherd dog, with a wolf-like proportions, with a wolf's gaze. But it lived next to humans, and people fed it. This is where it gets really interesting. Isotope analysis of the bones shows that this dog ate the same food as humans. Not scraps, not leftovers from butchering carcasses. The same food, from the table, so to speak. During the Ice Age, this was incredibly expensive. Every portion of food meant someone's survival. In winter, when hunting brought nothing, people could go hungry for weeks. And yet they shared with the dog, deliberately, regularly. Why? Hunting is the most obvious explanation. The dog as a tool. It senses animals before humans do. It chases, holds them, an investment in hunting tools. That theory works. Guarding the camp. That also makes sense. Wolves and other predators are afraid of their own kind, even if they're domesticated. The dog acts as a living alarm system. But here's what breaks the purely utilitarian picture. After death, these animals were treated the same way as humans. The same burial rituals, the same attitude toward the body. That's not how you treat a tool. When a tool breaks, it's thrown away. A family member is buried. It turns out that even 14,000 years ago, there was something in humans that didn't let them treat the creature next to them as a thing. We became attached. We mourned. We buried them with honor. This is one of the oldest human traits that we can confirm with physical evidence. Not cruelty, not war, but attachment to an animal. A hoard of 11th century coins at the future site of the Sizewell C nuclear power station in Suffolk was discovered by archaeologists from Oxford Cotswold Archaeology. They found a rare hoard of 321 silver coins from the 11th century in perfect condition. The coins were carefully sealed in a lead package, which the researchers nicknamed the pasty because of its resemblance to a Cornish pasty. Archaeologist Andre Peck admits that his hands were shaking when he first saw the shiny edge of one of the coins. The dating of this find covers the era of 3 English kings at once: Harold I, Harthacnut, and Edward the Confessor. Most of the coins were minted in London, but there are also specimens from Stafford, Norwich, Ipswich, and even Lincoln. According to the archaeologist, the owner of the hoard belonged to the wealthy middle class and, fearing political changes, decided to hide his savings. Most likely he was unable to return for them or couldn't find the place where he buried the hoard. An untouched tomb. Just 30 kilometers from Cairo, archaeologists found an ancient untouched tomb that is as much as 4,400 years old. This amazing discovery was made in the famous Saqqara necropolis. The tomb was built for a high-ranking priest who served under a pharaoh of the 5th dynasty and his family. You can tell that his life was full. On the walls, there are images of people making wine, playing musical instruments, sailing boats, and hunting. The tomb building is truly impressive. Its interior is decorated with large painted statues and impressive inscriptions that reveal the names of the priest's wife and mother. Archaeologists have already begun exploring 5 burial shafts inside the tomb, and we still have much to learn about ancient life in Egypt. Ancient labyrinth. Modern remote sensing methods are giving archaeology new tools to understand the past. One striking example is the study of the area around Rujum el-Hiri, an ancient complex of stone circles to the northeast of the Sea of Galilee. This mysterious monument clearly shows how satellite images allow us to look at the landscape from a completely different perspective. Scientists analyzed photos of the area within a 30-kilometer radius and discovered numerous megalithic structures, massive circles with thick walls and mysterious flower-shaped enclosures near rivers. According to one hypothesis, all of them could have been elements of irrigation, defense, or livestock enclosures. In addition, the images show burial mounds of various shapes and sizes. They might be burial sites or signal mounds. The results of geological measurements are no less intriguing. It seems that the territory itself has shifted over the past millennium, which has cast doubt on the hypothesis about the astronomical purpose of Rujum el-Hiri. The satellite image reveals the multi-layered nature of the construction, an archaeological palimpsest, where later structures were built on top of earlier ones. Such studies open a door to the distant past. By comparing satellite data, excavation results, and geophysical analyses, scientists hope to reconstruct the lives of the ancient inhabitants of the Levant and better understand why they built such monumental stone labyrinths and surrounded them with complex agricultural systems. Clay seals. During excavations at the Toli Sangi site in southern Iran, scientists discovered 17 tiny clay objects about 9,000 years old. Experts believe that these are a kind of seal used to close woven baskets, probably made of reed. Interestingly, a similar packaging tradition still exists in some parts of the region today. The site itself is located in a small mountain valley, which is suitable for early agriculture. Radiocarbon analyses of the remains of buildings and hearths date from 7050 to 6650 BC. Artifacts of various sizes, ranging from 12 to 24 mm in diameter, were found in the same trench as the charcoal samples, dated to the early pre-pottery Neolithic. At a quarry in South Africa, scientists from Germany began digging at a site where sharp, hard stones were sticking out of the ground, which were well suited for making cutting tools. They sifted every cubic meter of soil by hand to make sure they didn't miss a single fragment. And they found from 200,000 to 2 million worked fragments per cubic meter. That's not a typo. Thousands of traces of work, stones used to test the strength of the rock, tiny chips from processing heavy hammer stones. At the same time, there were almost no finished tools, no traces of dwellings, no food remains. People came here, worked the stone a little, took the blanks with them, and left, purposefully, like going to work. It seemed that this place was used from 220,000 to 110,000 BCE for 100,000 years in a row. For comparison, the entire history of Egypt from the first pharaoh to the present day is about 5,000 years. Rome, from its founding to its fall, is less than 3,000 years. And the knowledge about this particular place with good stone was passed down from hand to hand for 20 times longer than what we call human history has existed. Without books, without maps, without records. A father showed his son where to go. Then, one of the researchers took 353 found fragments and started putting them back together, matching the breaks like a three-dimensional puzzle. In the end, he restored the original rock blocks and literally saw exactly how the master worked 200,000 years ago, how he held the stone, where he struck what he wanted to achieve. Previously, it was thought ancient people randomly picked up stones as they traveled, but this site proved otherwise. They knew where the best material was, planned routes, and organized extraction. 220,000 years before any writing, before any city, before any state. Centuries-long duel for the best material. Let's get back to the monk. Because this story is much crazier than it seems at first. The procedure is called Sokushin Butsu, which roughly translates to becoming a Buddha in this body. It was practiced in Japan starting around the 9th century. The idea is both simple and wild at the same time. A monk could achieve enlightenment not through death, but by turning his body into an incorruptible relic while still alive. How did this work in practice? This is where the real horror begins. Stage 1, 2,000 days of a strict diet. No meat, no grains, only nuts, seeds, roots, and tree bark. The body starts to consume itself. Fat disappears, moisture leaves the muscles. This was done intentionally. The less organic matter in the body, the less insects and bacteria can destroy it after death. Stage 2. The monk would start drinking tea made from the sap of the urushi tree. This is the lacquer tree, the same one used to make Japanese lacquer. The sap is poisonous. In large doses, it kills. But in small amounts, it coats the internal organs with a thin protective film. For insects, this smell is unbearable. The body literally becomes inedible from the inside. Stage 3. The box. The monk sits in the lotus position. He was placed in a wooden sarcophagus and buried or sealed up. 2 tubes, one for air, the other a rope attached to a bell. Every day, one ring, alive every day. No one knows what he thought about in the darkness, what he felt when he realized the air was running out, how the last ring of the bell sounded. When the bell fell silent, the tubes were sealed. After another 1,000 days, the box was opened. If the body was preserved, the monk was recognized as a living Buddha. He was covered with lacquer, dressed in ritual clothes, and placed in a temple for worship. If not, he was buried with honors. Out of hundreds of monks who tried to follow this path, only a few succeeded. In Japan, about 12 confirmed cases are known. Monk Lu Quan is one of them. His statue stood in a Chinese temple for several centuries. Then somehow it ended up in private hands. Eventually it was placed in a Dutch museum. No one knew what was inside. Just an old Buddha statue. There are thousands like it. In 2015, researchers decided to perform a CT scan. It's a standard procedure for studying old sculptures, to check for cracks or cavities. And that's when they found him, sitting in the same lotus position. Inside the bronze and gold was a man who, 1,000 years ago, decided to become a god, and did. Analysis showed that inside the skull and chest cavity were scrolls with Chinese characters instead of internal organs. Monks sometimes filled the body cavities with sacred texts so that wisdom would literally live inside the relic. This is no longer just history. It's something else entirely. Now here's the question. If a monk was willing to spend 3 years in darkness in order to become incorruptible, what does that tell us about people that we've always been looking for a way to cheat death? And sometimes we did it so radically that 1,000 years later, Dutch scientists would open a statue and discover that it actually worked. A round man-made object was found at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. In the depths of Lake Kinneret in Israel, a huge sphere about 50 meters in diameter and 4,000 years old was discovered. Who made it, when, and why is still a mystery. Researchers from Tel Aviv University and Ariel University continue their efforts to solve this mystery. They have even proposed a new hypothesis that might explain the origin of this mysterious object. After a detailed study using a sonar and analysis of natural deposits, the scientists determined that this is a giant sphere made of large pieces of basalt. It is located at a depth of about 12 meters. Previously, scientists believed that it could be the biblical city of Miriam, the sister of the prophet Moses, who helped the Jews survive in the desert. But now researchers are suggesting a completely new idea. Remember the legend of Akai, the great hunter with a magical bow who was killed by a jealous grandmother. This legend says that the father searched for his son's body for a long time, found it, and buried it in the sea. Not just any sea, but the Sea of Galilee. Now, scientists want to understand what is hidden inside this giant sphere. To do this, they plan to conduct underwater research using ultrasonic equipment. Lakes under the ice. More than 400 subglacial lakes have already been found in Antarctica, and each of them has been isolated from the rest of the world and the atmosphere, which means that life there could be completely unique and ancient. Scientists have already drilled into 2 small lakes and discovered microbial life. But what happens in the larger lakes remains a mystery, since there is no sunlight there, so microbes can't use photosynthesis. For life to be more diverse, the water in the lake needs to move so that nutrients and oxygen are distributed evenly. On the surface of the Earth, this is done by wind and sun. Under the ice, the source of heat and movement can be geothermal heat, heat rising from the depths of the Earth. This heat is capable of creating currents in subglacial lakes, mixing the water and making it more hospitable for life. A bracelet that is 70,000 years old. Scientists believe that this bracelet, which is 65,000 to 70,000 years old, was created by the Denisovans, an ancient species of hominid closely related to, but distinct from, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. If this is confirmed, the date of the bracelet's creation will have to be pushed back by thousands of years. The bracelet was discovered in Siberia, and it may change our understanding of ancient human development. It is already forcing scientists to reconsider the known levels of technology. For example, the bracelet has a hole made by drilling or sawing. Fire, fish, and driftwood, 780,000 years ago. In the north of modern Israel, in the Jordan River Valley, there is a place called the Daughters of Jacob Bridge. Here, on the shore of a long-vanished lake, 780,000 years ago, very ancient people used to stop. Not yet those whom we call modern humans, but already quite similar to us. Scientists found charcoal from campfires, 266 samples, and in most cases they determined exactly which tree the firewood came from. More than half of the charcoal turned out to be remnants of ash, and almost a tenth was olive. But these trees didn't necessarily grow near the campsite in such large numbers. So where did all this firewood come from? From the lake, trees fall into the water. The current carries trunks and branches, and the lake washes them ashore. This is called driftwood, and scientists concluded that this place was chosen for the campsite partly because the lake itself delivered ready firewood. There was no need to chop or carry it. The firewood floated right up to the shore. 780,000 years ago, remains of food were found on the surface of stone tools, acorns, wild grains, nuts, aquatic plants, and fish bones, caught right in this lake and cooked over a fire. There are no hearths in the usual sense at the campsite, only scattered traces of burning in different spots. Researchers call these phantom hearths. Most likely they didn't start a new fire each time, but preserved the one already burning. They carried smoldering embers with them and didn't let the fire go out. Even today, there are tribes in Africa that do exactly this. Because making fire by friction is long and hard, and it's much easier to preserve a fire that's already burning. There's even older evidence that people used fire in this region, about 1 million years ago, at another site in Israel. The boundary is pushed further back into the past every few years, but the site on the shore of this lake stands out because of its details. Here we see not just traces of fire, but a specific choice of location, a specific choice of fuel, a specific fish prepared in a specific way 780,000 years ago. The mysterious cave. Scientists discovered a mysterious object in Antarctica using Google Maps. It's not just an object, it's a cave hidden beneath the glaciers. Scientists posted a video on YouTube showing the vault of this cave. Some believe the cave could have been man-made. The video shows a perfectly shaped vault. It is 23 meters high and 76 meters wide. Scientists noticed strange paths and steps at the entrance to the cave. This gives reason to think they might be of artificial origin. Others think it's a secret facility for UFOs, or an ultra-secret military base. There are also those who believe these are the architectural remains of an ancient civilization. Official science is still silent, but everyone agrees. With global warming, Antarctica will reveal many more secrets. An ancient astrotomb. In Spain, in a place where a sleeping giant lives, archaeologists have discovered a 5,000-year-old treasure. And the sleeping giant is actually a huge rock in the Andalusia region. The treasure they found is an incredible stone tomb called Piedon. Piedros Blancos, which translates as white stone. It sounds like the name of a superhero movie, doesn't it? And now archaeologists are sure that this tomb was built at the same time as the oldest megaliths in Antikythera. That's around 3000 BC. They even found ceramic offerings next to it. But what's even more amazing is that this tomb wasn't just built randomly, it was precisely aligned with the stars. Yeah, just like in a science fiction movie, this means that ancient people used it not only as a tomb, but also as an observation platform to study the night sky. They knew where and when important astronomical events would happen, such as solstices and equinoxes. And most likely they held special rituals and celebrations at this place. These amazing discoveries show us how smart and inventive our ancestors were. They created incredible structures that served not only as resting places for the dead, but also as tools for understanding the world around them. And here we are, thousands of years later, still learning from them thanks to these amazing discoveries. The legendary golden horse. Not long ago, news once again spread on social media that near Anapa, Russia, the legendary golden horse of King Mithridates, Eupator, was allegedly found. It is noteworthy that similar reports had already appeared in 2021, turning out to be an April Fool's joke. Now, however, the excavations taking place near the Anapskaya Stanitsa have resurfaced and made people discuss this story again. During rescue operations at the site of a future kindergarten, archaeologists discovered a burial ground about 2,000 years old. In one of the graves, they found not only human remains but also those of a horse. In others, there were horse skeletons, glass and ceramic vessels, various beads, as well as weapons and harnesses. The items, including beads made of amber, carnelian, and faience, indicate the local tribe's connections with the ancient world. Among the finds, they noted a scarab, a symbol of rebirth for the ancient Egyptians. Of particular interest were the glass vessels, which became widespread throughout the periphery of the Roman Empire thanks to the improvement of glass-blowing techniques. Despite the excitement, there is no direct evidence that this is actually Mithridates' golden horse. Scientists emphasize that legends can easily grow, and the rich burial of a noble person can quite possibly acquire fantastic features over time. A child found a Neanderthal tool. 3 years ago, 6-year-old Ben picked up an unusual stone on a Sussex beach. At home, he forgot about the find, but later it turned out to be a Neanderthal axe that is 50,000 years old. When Ben's family contacted James Sainsbury, the curator of the Worthing Museum of Archaeology, he expected to see an ordinary stone, but one look confirmed its uniqueness. It was a hand axe from the late Neanderthals. These are extremely rare, since their population was quite small at that time. The museum has only one similar specimen, and judging by its condition, the new find had been underwater for a long time. Researchers date this period to the end of the Neanderthals' existence in Europe, when modern humans had already settled Britain. The stone was probably transported with pebbles from the English Channel or the now submerged Doggerland, once inhabited thousands of years ago. On November 24, Ben and his parents brought the axe to the museum. An hour later, it was already on public display. Sainsbury emphasized that this is an extremely rare find for Sussex. Ben's family is glad that their accidental discovery has made a significant contribution to science.
Второй сфинкс.
The Great Sphinx has stood in Giza for 4,500 years. During this time, it has been studied by thousands of scholars and hundreds of expeditions. Every inch has been photographed, measured, and described. You would think, what else could possibly be found there? Between the front paws of the Sphinx stands a stone slab. It is called the Dream Stele. It was installed by Pharaoh Thutmose IV around 1400 BC. On it is a legend about how a young prince fell asleep at the feet of the Sphinx, and the Sphinx appeared to him in a dream. "Clear the sand from me, and you will become Pharaoh." Thutmose cleared it and became Pharaoh. Standard propaganda, a standard political move to legitimize power. But on this stele, 2 sphinxes are depicted. Italian investigator Filippo Biondi asked a simple question. What if this isn't symbolism? What if it's a plan? His team conducted a geometric analysis of the Giza plateau, drew a line from the center of the Khafra pyramid through the existing sphinx, and extended it further across the plateau. The line ended at a hill, 30 meters of hardened sand, which had never been excavated and had never attracted anyone's interest. Satellite radar scanning showed that under the hill, there is a structure similar in size and shape to the first Sphinx. And that's not all. The first Sphinx scan has long been known. 7 shaft chambers lie beneath it. So, under the hill, a similar network can be seen. Vertical shafts, horizontal passages going deeper, almost mirror images. Biondi speaks cautiously. The scan data is not proof. Excavations with geologists are needed, real test pits are needed, and time is needed. But the symmetry between the two objects is becoming harder and harder to ignore. And that's not all. The same scan showed that, under the Giza Plateau as a whole, there may be an extensive underground complex. Biondi calls it an underground megastructure, a system of passages and chambers that no one has seen, perhaps since the time of those who built it. What's there? Tombs? A ritual space? A library of texts that could change everything we know about Egypt? No one on Earth knows. What's important to know is that Giza is the most studied place on Earth, with top minds from the past 2 centuries working there. And still, under 30 meters of ordinary sand, there could be a second Sphinx. That doesn't mean archaeologists did a bad job. It means the planet knows how to hide things. Hide them well and patiently for millennia. Meteorite iron, 12,000, 10,000 years ago. In the southwest of China, in Sichuan province, at the headwaters of the Yangtze River, there is a place called Sanxingdui. It may be the remains of the capital of an entire state, about which almost no written records have survived. In the sacrificial pits here, they find amazing things. Huge bronze masks with bulging eyes over a meter tall, golden scepters, jade figurines, objects crafted with such skill that you look at them and can't understand how they were made by hand. In one of the pits, they found an object in terrible condition, fragile, crumbling, resembling an axe about 20 centimeters long. They extracted it directly from the ground, cleaned it in the laboratory, and analyzed the metal composition. It turned out to contain almost 20% nickel. That's an important figure. Iron extracted from terrestrial ore contains less than 1% nickel, but iron from a meteorite gives exactly these figures, about 20% and higher. Someone found a stone that fell from the sky, realized it was harder than anything else on Earth, and made a tool out of it. Around 1,200 BC, several centuries, before people in this region even learned how to smelt iron from ore. But such finds exist all over the world. In Egypt, there are meteorite iron ornaments over 5,000 years old, made even before the pyramids were built. In western China, there's a knife from around 3000 BC. In Turkey, there's an amulet that's almost 5,000 years old. In Poland, there are bracelets and pins that are about 2,600 years old. In different parts of the world, in cultures that had no idea about each other, people looked at the sky, saw falling stones, and realized that they were more valuable than gold. Because it really was more valuable. Iron is stronger than any bronze and sharper than any copper. The first metal that humanity became familiar with fell from the sky. Tell me in the comments, did you know about this?
Мумифицированные пингвины.
Researchers from China discovered a cemetery of mummified penguins in Antarctica, and many of them were just chicks. At first, scientists thought that the penguins didn't survive 2 periods of extreme precipitation, but penguins live in Antarctica and are used to the cold and snow, so something doesn't quite add up here. Now, scientists suggest that climate change is to blame for these mass penguin deaths. In their opinion, the increased humidity caused by global warming could have led to this tragedy. As it turned out, the penguins were not prepared for such conditions and died immediately. This happened twice. About 750 and 200 years ago, scientists determined this through radiocarbon dating, and it seems the penguins didn't die immediately but rather died gradually. The Calganta disk, an object called the Calganta disk, kept in the Rafael Larco Herrera Archaeological Museum in the capital of Peru, Lima, may be evidence that people in ancient times knew what the arms of a galaxy look like. This artifact, which is believed to have been created about 2,000 years ago, looks like a spiral galaxy. But here's the catch. The number of arms on this disk does not match the number of arms in our galaxy. If we assume that the disk really depicts a galaxy, it calls into question many things we thought we knew about ancient civilizations. At the same time, the Kalganta disc remains a mysterious artifact that raises more questions than it answers. The box with a combination lock is a unique artifact from the 12th century created by craftsmen from Iran. This exquisite object not only served as a container, but also demonstrated the outstanding engineering skills of its time. The box is equipped with 4 double dials, each of which has 16 positions. The combination of all possible settings creates an impressive number of options. 16 to the power of 8, or 4 billion, 294,967,296. This made the box extremely reliable, as it was virtually impossible to crack the code. The materials used for this item include brass, gold, and silver. The ornamentation and Arabic inscription covering the surface highlight the sophistication of the craftsmanship and indicate the high status of the owner. The box is now kept in the Copenhagen Museum, where it attracts visitors' attention as an outstanding example of medieval Eastern technology and decorative art. Its creation date is estimated to be around the year 1200. The Singapore Stone, 180 Years of Silence. In 1892, British sailors discovered a huge sandstone boulder about 3 meters high at the mouth of the Singapore River. On its surface, there were inscriptions, dense lines of unfamiliar symbols that did not resemble any known script. Colonial officials made drawings of the inscription, created rubbings, and sent copies to scholars in Calcutta. The scholars looked at them and shrugged. The script could not be deciphered. In 1843, the stone was blown up. British engineers were expanding the fort. It was simply destroyed. A few fragments were saved in time. They were sent to Calcutta for study. Most of them were lost along the way. In the end, only a single fragment made its way back to Singapore, and it is now kept in the National Museum. The rough sketches from 1819 in this fragment are all that's left of the inscription, which originally had about 50 lines. The script on the stone did not match any known writing systems. It was closest to the ancient Javanese Kawi script, but it was not the same. Approximately somewhere between the 10th and 14th centuries, what exactly was written there, who wrote it, and in what language remained a mystery for almost 200 years. In 2025, a group of linguists introduced a program that works roughly like this. It takes the preserved symbols, assigns a code to each one, analyzes the distance between them, and identifies spaces. And based on how similar languages are structured, it predicts which symbols could have been on the lost fragments. As a result, you don't get just one version of the text, but several, with different options for filling in the gaps. There's still no full decipherment, but for the first time in 180 years, there are specific theories about what might have been written there. The stone was destroyed to build a fort that no longer exists. The fort was demolished for new buildings, which are now also gone. And now they're trying to reconstruct the inscription that was blown up along with the stone, using rough sketches from the 19th century and the help of a neural network. The Singapore Stone is among about a dozen scripts in the world that remain undeciphered. Among them is the Cretan script, Linear A Proto-Elamite script from ancient Iran, the script of the Indus Valley Civilization, and the famous Phaistos disc, on which symbols are stamped in a spiral and whose meaning has remained unknown for over 100 years. All these scripts share one common problem. There is too little text to statistically reconstruct the language. The fewer the samples, the less chance there is to find patterns. There are especially few samples of the Singapore Stone, just one fragment and rough sketches from 200 years ago. The program developed by the lawyers is designed to work with minimal material, trying to guess the structure based on indirect evidence. Whether it will work out is still unknown, but this is the first real attempt in over 180 years. The gold of the immortals and the jade shield. In ancient times, gold was not just a currency. It was the flesh of the gods, guaranteeing its owner status in the world of the dead. In 2025, archaeologists in Panama opened a tomb in El Caño Park that literally dazzled the researchers. This is the burial of an elite chief, dated to the year 800 AD inside. There were not just ornaments, but a real arsenal of power made of pure gold. In the deep shaft, archaeologists discovered massive bracelets, carved chest plates, and gold ear ornaments. But what amazed the scientists was not the value of the metal, but its design. On the gold, bats and crocodiles are engraved, fierce guides to the afterlife. The level of metalworking proves that the craftsmen of Panama mastered the most complex techniques hundreds of years before the arrival of Europeans. This was not an isolated village, but a powerful dynastic center where gold was used as a tool to demonstrate power. But while in Panama the rulers relied on the shine of metal, in Guatemala the Maya chiefs believed in the magic of eternal stone. In the tomb of the founder of one of the great dynasties, archaeologists found the mask of Tecapchac. It is made up of hundreds of jade mosaic pieces. For the Maya, this stone was more valuable than gold. Jade symbolized eternal breath and life. The mask served as a kind of biological shield for the soul. It was placed on the face of the deceased king to protect his appearance from decay and to declare his divine status before the ancestors. Every detail of the mask, from the mother-of-pearl eyes to the inlays of seashells, is a clear message. This person remains a ruler even in the realm of death. Sometimes power required not only gold, but also brilliant propaganda. When the Persian king Darius I conquered Egypt 2,500 years ago, he faced the problem of legitimacy. The Egyptians hated the invaders, so Darius made a strategic move in politics. He ordered himself to be depicted in reliefs, wearing the traditional attire of an Egyptian pharaoh. The Persian ruler on the walls of temples wore Egyptian crowns and symbols of power, calling himself the beloved of the god Amon. Darius understood symbols work more effectively than swords. By adopting a pharaoh's appearance, he changed from occupier to legitimate heir of the gods in the locals' eyes. This was an example of soft power in ancient times where image and art were used to govern vast territories. These finds, the golden crocodiles from Panama, the jade lichmai, and the Persian king pharaoh, show us one truth. Ancient rulers did not simply accumulate wealth. They built their image from the most durable materials, believing that gold, stone, and the right symbol could deceive time and keep them at the forefront of history forever. Incredible jewelry craftsmanship. On Norway's west coast in Vestland County during a burial mound excavation, archaeologist Soren Deinhoff found an item in the 1990s that has only been seen about 24 times in all of Scandinavia. A tiny gold pendant called a riata, dating to around the year 200 AD. It has a diameter of 2 centimeters, weighs a few grams, but the level of craftsmanship is finer than a human hair. In Rome, these items were worn as earrings, while in the north they became pendants. The burial mound was notable for its size and location. A wealthy, non-cremated burial was placed atop the ridge. Analysis of the soil and accompanying finds, such as glass beads and metal belts, confirmed that it was a female burial of elite status. The next day, Deinhoff extracted 2 more silver fibulae. These are brooches or pins that held dresses on the shoulders. Similar pendants are more common in northern Germany and the Danish islands. Only 3 exist in Norway. Scientists suggest that the jewelry arrived through marriage alliances between noble families from southern Scandinavia and the western Firth region. Modern jewelers admit that it is possible to replicate the work, but it would take years of training and more gold to compensate for the waste. New alien mummies. In 2017, something unusual was discovered in one of the Peruvian caves. A dried-up figure resembling Voldemort, with 3 fingers and an elongated skull, attracted the attention of the whole world. An entire army of experts was the first to study it, including journalist and ufologist Jaime Maussan. He even claimed that there are rare metals and alloys inside the mummies, as if they were cosmic implants. While scientists argued, the mummies found friends. 2 new discoveries, nicknamed Palomo and Antonio, amazed everyone. 3 fingers, slanted eyes, and an age of about 1,500 years. A CT scan showed that their organs are similar to those of humans. On Antonio's body, traces of a knife wound were found, and Palomo had remnants of hair. Hairy aliens are something new. An army in the swamp, the year 205 AD. In Denmark, in the eastern part of the country, there is an old bog called Illerup Odal. Several decades ago, they started finding weapons there, and it hasn't stopped. Now the total count has exceeded 15,000 items: swords, spears, shields, belts, horse harnesses, personal belongings. Scientists say that just as many items still remain in the bog. All of this was deliberately destroyed, bent, broken, and thrown into the water as an offering to the gods from those who were victorious. And that's exactly why everything has been so well preserved for almost 2,000 years. Around the year 205 AD, about 1,000 warriors crossed Denmark on more than 50 ships. They were heading south to join the Roman army, which at that time paid foreign warriors with silver coins to guard the northern borders of the empire. All the swords and coins found with the dead were Roman. That means there was a connection to Rome even before they set out. Someone paid them in advance. From Denmark to the nearest Roman border is about 650 kilometers. That's a month's journey on foot. Thousands of people would need more than a ton of food a day, and there was nowhere to buy it. So they took it from the locals along the way. The local tribes of Jutland responded with war and completely defeated the army. The victors took everything valuable. They deliberately bent every sword and every spear so that the weapons could no longer be used, and they sank everything in the bog. Among the finds are items that point to Norway as the place where the army came from. Combs made from elk and deer antlers. Special flints for making fire are characteristic only of these places. The analysis of horse bones points to another region. Scientists are still debating, but something else is important. Several blades have inscriptions engraved in runes, some of the oldest we know of. These are the personal names of the owners: Lagutevas, Gaups, Nitijo, Svarta. One of the leading researchers of this discovery also examined events in Scandinavia during the same period, from the late 2nd to early 3rd century AD, and found the results intriguing. It was at that time in Norway and Denmark that large wooden halls began to appear, long, with high roofs. In their construction, they were very similar to Roman basilicas. Iron production rose rapidly as trade routes to the south opened. Burials of the nobility began including Roman silver, weapons, and tableware. Researchers believe that all this was brought by those who returned home from the Roman army. They had seen how the empire was organized, how buildings were constructed, how trade was arranged, and they reproduced it at home. The army that drowned in the Jutland bog was part of this movement. They just didn't make it to Rome. Which country are you from? Write in the comments. It's interesting to see where our viewers are from. Shoes for eternal victory. Archaeologists often find items that were created not for this life, but for triumph in the afterlife. In 1923, Howard Carter discovered thousands of artifacts in Tutankhamun's tomb, but among dozens of pairs of shoes, one stood out as special. This is a pair of leather sandals, dated to 1300 BC. Their size corresponds to a modern size 44, but the value is not in the dimensions, it's in what is depicted on the insoles. The sole beneath the pharaoh's foot is covered with images of bound captives, symbolizing the nine bows, ancient Egypt's traditional enemies. The sandals are made of wood, covered with veneer, leather, and gold foil. At the toes and heel, there are images of bows, symbols of hostile peoples. The artifact's meaning was simple and harsh. Every step Tutankhamun took in the afterlife was to crush his enemies into the ground. Even on the pharaoh's mummy, golden finger covers and sandals made of pure gold were found. This was a world where the ruler's power was confirmed not only by armies, but also by symbolic superiority that was meant to last forever. Books bound in human skin. In the 19th century in Europe and the United States, there was a rare but real practice. Books were bound in human skin. Experts call it anthropodermic bibliopegy, literally a book bound in human skin. Most often, the skin was taken from executed criminals or patients of anatomical theaters. 1837, Boston, USA. The bandit James Allen bequeathed that after his death, his skin should be removed and used to bind his own memoirs. On the cover, it is written in Latin, "This book is made from Allen's skin." 1830, Devon, England. The rat catcher George Cadmar poisoned his wife. After his execution, his skin was used for a collection of poetry by John Milton. 1882, France. A countess who died of tuberculosis bequeathed her skin to the amateur astronomer Camille Flammarion to use for the first copy of his book Terre du Ciel. And now, let's talk about entire collections. Harvard Library in the United States has at least 3 volumes bound this way. One 17th century treatise contains a note about Jones Wright, whose skin was removed on August 4, 1632. The John Hay Library in London confirms the existence of a medical atlas by Vesalius with a brown human skin cover. The motives were different: a memory of a crime, the rarity of the souvenir, scientific interest. Legally, it was in a gray area. The bodies of criminals were often given to surgical schools, and the leftovers were used for leather. These bindings are not put on display, but they are not destroyed either. Institutions consider them historical artifacts, showing how far people could go in the search for a unique edition. Execution pit near Cambridge, 9th century. In England, not far from Cambridge, student volunteers were doing archaeological fieldwork, carefully digging layer by layer, and found a pit with the remains of at least 10 men. At the bottom of the pit lay 4 relatively intact skeletons, and on top of them someone had thrown skulls, arms, and legs in complete disarray. Body parts from different people were mixed together and thrown in. 9th century AD, this place was located on the border between English lands and Viking territory, one of the bloodiest frontiers in all of medieval Europe. One of the skulls stood out immediately, a young man aged 17 to 24, about 196 centimeters tall, while the average man of that time was about 20 centimeters shorter. On the side of the skull there was a neat round hole about 3 centimeters in diameter with smooth edges. The edges of the hole had started to heal, the bone began to grow and started to close the gap. This means that the hole was made while he was alive, and after the operation, he lived long enough, days, weeks, or maybe even longer, for the bone to begin to heal. Then he was killed and thrown into this pit. Scientists suggest that the growth in the holes in the skull are connected. There is a condition in which the gland at the base of the brain that controls growth becomes overactive. A person grows much taller than normal, but at the same time the pressure inside his skull keeps increasing, and he starts having severe headaches. Most likely the holes were drilled specifically to relieve this pressure, and the operation worked. The patient survived. In 1976, another mass grave from the 8th to 9th centuries with 5 people was found in about the same place. The current discovery is the first in almost 50 years and is significantly larger. Isotope analysis and DNA work are still ahead, which will take several years. Even now, it's clear someone in the 9th century could drill a skull so the patient could recover and go home. We don't know this young man's name, but we do know that he was found by students during the first real excavation of their lives. The Tibetan Iron Man. While physicists in Lufera tried to control sound, ideologists from the Reich's secretive Ahnenerbe department searched not in labs, but through history and the depths of space. Himmler was fixated on the belief that the Aryan race originated in Tibet, the roof of the world. In 1938, a top-secret expedition led by SS Sturmbannführer Ernst Schaefer was sent there, officially to study the local flora and fauna. But the real goal was hidden in the instructions given to anthropologist Bruno Beger to find evidence of the existence of a superior race and artifacts from the legendary Shambhala. From this expedition, an object was brought to Berlin that still makes scientists shudder. This is a small statue of the Buddhist deity Vaisravana, weighing about 10 kilograms, which the SS men nicknamed the Iron Man. On the deity's belly was a left-facing swastika. For Buddhists, it's a symbol of good luck, but for the Nazis, it was undeniable proof of ancient kinship. The statue disappeared right after the fall of Berlin and was considered a myth for decades, until it resurfaced in a private collection in 2012. The owner permitted an analysis, and the results shocked scientists. A group of researchers from the University of Stuttgart, led by Elmar Buchner, determined that the statue was carved not from stone and not from ordinary iron. It is a taxite, the rarest type of meteoritic iron, with an abnormally high content of nickel and cobalt. Chemical analysis showed that the material of the statue is a fragment of the Chinj meteorite, which fell on the border of Siberia and Mongolia about 15,000 years ago. The Nazis, either unknowingly or perhaps fully aware, brought to Germany an artifact literally made from star iron. For Himmler, who believed in the world ice theory, according to which life on Earth was brought from space in the form of ice blocks with metal inclusions, this discovery became the Holy Grail. But why did the SS need this meteoritic idol? According to the interrogations of the Ahnenerbe staff, they believed that metals that came from space possessed a specific energy capable of enhancing extrasensory abilities, and serving as a key to communicate with certain higher entities. The Iron Man statue was not just a souvenir, it was studied in secret laboratories as an energy accumulator. Where did the other artifacts from that expedition disappear to? In Schaefer's archives, there are mentions of strange texts on bones that supposedly contained instructions for controlling the forces of nature. Today, the Iron Man is recognized as the only image of a human in the world carved from a meteorite. But was it the only celestial key used by the war itself? Artifacts from space were only part of the plan to achieve world domination. If meteorites gave mystical power, then German engineers planned to use the sun itself as a tool of absolute destruction. In 1943, deep within the rocket centers, a project was born that today would be called the Death Star of the Third Reich. The drone saw an ancient city in Neamt County, Romania. In the dense forest, they found a fortified settlement about 5,000 years old. It can't be seen from the ground. The ramparts and ditches are concealed by tree canopies. LiDAR, a laser scanning tool, helped by creating an accurate elevation model through the foliage. The drones flew over the area, and a plan appeared on the screen. Platforms on the hilltops, closed lines of ramparts, deep ditches stretching in some places for hundreds of meters. These are not random mounds. The defensive lines block the ridges, entrances are controlled, and inside you can see terraces for housing and workshops. Such a volume of earthworks
Без организации невозможно.
requires teams, planning, and time. Field checks confirm the model. In the cross-sections, there is a cultural layer and charcoal for future dating. For now, the archaeologists are working carefully. First, the area is mapped, then specific excavations begin. The ramparts and ditches suggest the site dates to the Neolithic Bronze Age transition. The Golden Mummy, 4,300 years old. Egypt, Saqqara Necropolis, 30 kilometers from Cairo. Egyptian scientists opened a 15-meter deep shaft and saw a stone coffin sealed with lime mortar. The seal was intact. It hadn't been touched since the day it was sealed. 4,300 years ago, most Egyptian tombs were looted back in ancient times, sometimes just a few decades after the burial. This one remained untouched for 43 centuries. Inside was the mummy of a man named Hekashepes, and his body was covered with thin gold sheets placed directly over the burial wrappings. In ancient Egypt, gold was called the flesh of the gods, a material that does not rust, does not darken, and does not decay. Only those who were in the closest circle to the pharaohs were allowed to cover their bodies with gold during the burial. Priests and officials of lower rank were not granted such an honor. On the floor of the burial chamber lay an untouched layer of dust, and in this dust there were preserved footprints, the footprints of the workers who last left the chamber and sealed it from the outside. After them, not a single person had been here. In the neighboring shafts of the same complex, they found the tomb of a priest with 9 limestone figurines, which, according to Egyptian beliefs, were supposed to receive sacrificial offerings instead of the deceased owner, and the burial of a man named Phaetex with wooden statues and a stone sarcophagus. Wood almost never survives in Egyptian soil, and these items began to deteriorate literally within the first hours after being uncovered. They had to be urgently preserved right on the spot. On the walls of all the chambers, there are reliefs with names, lists of titles, images of relatives, and scenes from everyday life. Egyptians were not buried anonymously. Each person left behind a detailed stone story about who he was.
Саккара не заканчивается.
Every year, new shafts are discovered there, and yet less than half of the entire necropolis, which was formed over almost 3,000 years, has been excavated. Subscribe. When I find something important, we'll be the first to tell you. Near the tomb of Hekashepes, there used to be burials of royal priests and high-ranking courtiers. This suggests that the area was used specifically for people close to the pharaoh. The Saqqara necropolis itself is included in the UNESCO World Heritage List. Multiple international missions are excavating here simultaneously. In 2023, the Grand Egyptian Museum opened near the pyramids of Giza, where some of these finds eventually end up. The discovery rewrote the history of alcohol. The process of alcohol distillation goes much further back than previously thought. New excavations in the tomb of Liu He, the 9th emperor of the Western Han Dynasty, have shown that 2,000 years ago in China, people already knew how to produce distillate. Scientists found a bronze vessel called the Heavenly Pot, which served as a key part of devices for distilling wine. Before this, historical texts indicated the appearance of such technologies only during the Yuan dynasty, that is, 1,000 years later. Liu He, despite his short reign, left behind an impressive legacy. In addition to the distiller itself, his tomb contained the oldest painting of Confucius, as well as thousands of pieces of armor made of iron, copper, and lacquered leather. All of this testifies to the high level of craftsmanship during the Western Han period. An experiment with a replica bronze vessel showed a distillation efficiency exceeding 70% while preserving the taste and aroma of the beverage. It was originally thought that this vessel could have been used for perfumes or medicine, but now its main purpose is clear: the production of alcohol. The results of the study help us better understand the evolution of brewing and distillation practices, complementing historical records and revealing the potential of early Chinese inventors. Homer's papyrus inside a mummy. The Hispano-Egyptian expedition was excavating a necropolis in the Egyptian city of Oxyrhynchus. Mummies, burial items, standard work, until they found a papyrus inside one of the mummies and unrolled it to reveal a Greek text of Homer's Iliad. Inside the book was the very part where all the Greek troops and ships that went to Troy are listed. The names of the cities, the names of the leaders, the number of ships from each. One of the most detailed and longest passages in the entire poem. Oxyrhynchus is known for the fact that over the centuries, 1,000 papyri were found here in ancient garbage heaps. Texts that people threw away when they became unnecessary, and which lay there for almost 2,000 years. Among them were fragments of plays and poems that were thought to be lost forever. But the Homer papyrus was not found in a garbage heap, but inside a person. Someone placed it there deliberately just before the burial. Why? At that time, Egypt was under Roman rule, and Greek education was a marker of high society. The ability to read Homer distinguished an educated person from an uneducated one as clearly as a prestigious university diploma does today. Perhaps the papyrus was placed as a sign of status, perhaps as protection. The Iliad contains hundreds of names and places, and the deceased might have believed that the text would protect him just as Egyptian spells did. Scholars don't have a definitive answer. Many other items were found in the necropolis. Some of the deceased had gold and copper tongue-shaped plates in their mouths. They were positioned so the person could speak at judgment before Osiris in the realm of the dead. Next to the mummified bandaged bodies were vessels with burned remains. Different burial traditions in one place. Clay figurines of Egyptian gods were found alongside a small bronze statuette of Cupid. Cat skulls were carefully wrapped in linen cloth. All of this was found together in one necropolis, from people who lived at the same time and buried their dead side by side, each according to their own customs. Oxyrhynchus is a truly special place in the history of ancient texts. At the end of the 19th century, people began systematically excavating old garbage heaps here and unearthed thousands of papyri with texts that were thought to be lost forever. Fragments of plays, poems, and works that had previously survived only by title. Now it turns out that some texts were not thrown away by the residents of Oxyrhynchus, but were taken with them to the grave. The Panegyriște treasure. This is a ritual cup, part of the famous Panegyriște treasure, discovered in 1949 in southern Bulgaria. The artifact weighs 845 grams and is cast from 23-karat gold. Its diameter is 25 centimeters. Instead of the usual ribbed petals, the craftsman pressed out 73 miniature heads of Nubians, arranging them in 6 concentric rings around the central recess for wine or aromatic oil. The bowl belonged to the Odrysian king Xuthus III and was probably used at feasts where the Thracian elite demonstrated their connection to the Hellenistic world. The images of African barbarians played a dual role, as exotic decoration and as a reminder of the king's power overseas gold mining. A cache of royal regalia. The unexpected discovery in the dungeons of the Vilnius Cathedral shocked historians. A carefully sealed vault was discovered containing burial regalia associated with the rulers of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Poland. There they found crowns, scepters, chains, rings, and plaques that belonged to King Alexander, his mother Elizabeth of Habsburg, and Barbara Radziwill, the wife of Sigismund Augustus. These items were not worn during their lifetime. They were made specifically for burial ceremonies. According to the researcher, the regalia were first discovered back in 1931, but with the start of World War II, they were hidden deeper in the catacombs and sealed up to protect them from being looted. The location of this hiding place eluded archaeologists for decades, until in December 2024, they conducted a detailed examination of all the cavities using an endoscope, comparing archival diagrams with new plans of the cathedral. As a result, the treasures were found. Barbara Radziwill, whose tragic fate became legendary, died soon after her coronation, which made the burial of her regalia especially significant for her contemporaries.
Ритуальный груз из Филиппин.
The island of Guam in the western Pacific Ocean is 2,300 kilometers east of the Philippines. In the coastal Retidian cave, archaeologists found microscopic traces of rice in red ceramics. The radiocarbon age is 3,500 to 3,100 years. This is the earliest evidence of a cultivated plant being brought to such a distant island. The key evidence is phytoliths, tiny silica structures that preserve the shape of leaves and husks after the plant decomposes. The team from the University of Guam and the Australian National University examined the pottery shards using a micro-CT scanner and petrographic analysis. The shapes of the phytoliths matched Asian varieties of rice. There are no tools for field cultivation or traces of irrigation nearby. This means the grains were not brought for agriculture. The researchers lean toward the theory of ritual baggage. The rice may have been used in ceremonies or as a symbol of the settlers' connection to their homeland. On the Mariana Islands, this is the only case of pre-European use of rice. On other remote atolls, the plant would not appear for another 2,000 years. The discovery confirms that the first seafarers of the Pacific Ocean did not simply drift with the currents, but planned their route. They brought parts of their culture, even if they couldn't grow them in the new land. The first Mayan filling. In a burial from the pre-Hispanic period, a molar was found. A lower back tooth, one of those deep in the mouth. A small cavity was carefully carved into the surface of the tooth, and inside it was a green jadeite stone. The Mayan civilization was known for the practice of decorating teeth. Jade, turquoise, and hematite were inserted into the front teeth. This was visible when speaking and showed a person's social status. A molar in the back of the mouth is never visible under any circumstances, so it could not have been an ornament. Scientists performed a tomographic scan of the tooth, similar to what is done in dental clinics, but much more powerful, and looked inside without touching the find. Inside the pulp chamber, they found mineral deposits that form only in a living tooth in response to trauma or prolonged irritation of the tissue. The tooth reacted to intervention during its owner's lifetime. The owner of the tooth was between 24 and 30 years old. Someone carved a cavity in a living tooth, placed jadeite inside, and secured it, presumably with natural plant resins that the Maya used for medicinal purposes and that have antibacterial properties. The stone was inserted in such a way that it did not interfere with chewing. In other words, the person who did this made sure that the tooth would continue to function normally after the procedure. This is the first dental filling in human history confirmed by physical evidence. In other regions of the world, traces of dental drilling have also been found in ancient remains. For example, in Pakistan, drilled teeth about 9,000 years old were discovered, but in that case it was only drilling. Here the tooth was drilled, the damaged tissue was removed, and the cavity was sealed with a permanent material. So this is a full-fledged filling, not just a hole. For the Maya, it also had a sacred meaning as a symbol of life and water, so the procedure could have had a ritual significance in addition to a medical one. This is the first such discovery in world archaeology. The Maya performed dental operations starting around 300 AD, using tubular drills made of jade or quartz, with the addition of abrasive powder from crushed minerals. Judging by the findings, patients survived the operations. There are no signs of widespread inflammation around the modified teeth in the burials. A jadeite filling in a molar shows their skills were used even on teeth, not visible externally, indicating it was for treatment, not decoration. A bloody trail in desert-like megastructures. Archaeology is like investigating a mass murder long after the statute of limitations has passed. In Serbia, in a place called Goma Lava, scientists opened a shallow pit and discovered a real nightmare. The remains of 77 people piled together. The first assumption was an ancient epidemic or famine. But when bioarchaeologists cleaned the soil off the bones, the disease theory fell apart. More than half of the dead were children from 1 to 12 years old. Most of the adults were women, and all of them had the same mark of death: unhealed injuries on the back and top of the skull. This was not a fair fight. People were killed from behind as they tried to run away. Genetic analysis added even more mysteries. Out of 77 people, only 3, a mother and 2 daughters, were related. All the others were strangers to each other, raised in different regions. This was not the wiping out of a single village, but a targeted hunt for a specific demographic during the period of political chaos in the 9th century BC, a mass execution whose cause lay hidden in the earth for 3,000 years. But if in Serbia we see traces of human cruelty, then in the sands of Africa, archaeologists find traces of human madness on a different scale. Everyone knows about the Great Pyramids of Egypt, but few have heard that in Sudan there are twice as many. The Nubian Desert holds the legacy of the Black Pharaohs of the Kush civilization, which at its peak controlled territories from the Nile Delta to modern-day Khartoum. Here in Meroe, there are more than 250 pyramids. They are smaller than the Egyptian ones, ranging from 6 to 30 meters in height. But their architecture is unique: narrow bases and incredibly steep walls at a 70-degree angle. The Kushites began building them when Egypt had already abandoned the idea because of an economic catastrophe. The burial chambers here were filled with gold, Greek glass, and Roman ceramics, confirming that the forgotten pyramids of Sudan were once a center of world trade until civil wars and sand wiped them off the map. However, even the ambitions of the pharaohs had their limits, and you can see that in Aswan. There, in the granite quarries, lies an unfinished obelisk, the largest monolith ever attempted to be raised by man. If it had been completed, this giant would have soared 42 meters into the sky and weighed 1,200 tons. That's like 3 fully loaded Boeing 747s, carved from a single piece of rock. Scientists believe the project was overseen by the female pharaoh Hatshepsut. Thousands of workers spent years chiseling the hardest granite with dolerite balls, centimeter by centimeter, freeing the giant from the bedrock. But then everything fell apart. When the obelisk was nearly separated from the rock, a crack appeared, undoing the enormous effort with one natural flaw. The builders simply dropped their tools and left, leaving us with a unique blueprint of ancient technologies. Traces of wedges and markings are still visible on the surface, showing exactly how the Egyptians planned to overcome gravity. The obelisk remained lying in its stone cradle, a symbol of ambitions that proved stronger than the abilities of even the greatest builders of the ancient world. The oldest bridge in England. In England, there is an amazing wooden bridge from the Neolithic era. It is almost 6,000 years old. This path, called Sweet Track, is located across the marshy area in the Somerset Levels. It was named after Ray Sweet, who discovered it in 1970. The exact dating was determined using dendrochronology. Sweet Track was created as a shortcut across the marsh. It was actively used for 10 years, but was then abandoned, possibly due to rising water levels. Items found along the trail include stone axes, arrows, remains of a dish, parts of bows, bone hooks, and a fragment of a spoon. The road is about 1.8 kilometers long, and it connected 2 Neolithic settlements on different sides of the marsh. Today, the Sweet Track is considered the oldest known road in England. Surprisingly, the technology for making such wooden walkways has hardly changed over the past millennia. This unique discovery allows us to learn more about the lives of people in the Neolithic era and their methods of transportation. Meteorites help win lotteries. In 2015, a bright meteor streaked across the sky over Kanchanaburi, Thailand, lighting up the sky with green and orange flashes. Since then, there have been rumors that its fragments scattered throughout the surrounding area. In fact, meteors have visited Thailand more than once in recent years, leaving people with black stones that are believed to have magical powers. A more well-known story comes from Phathalung province. A married couple, Sirapu Vadon, discovered strange boulders weighing up to 20 kilograms in a palm plantation. At night, lightning struck the garden, and in the morning the couple saw burning pits and mysterious fragments inside them. After bringing the gift from the sky home, they soon felt a surge of energy and noticed that they argued less. Curious neighbors noticed unusual patterns on the surface of the stones, mistaking them for lucky lottery numbers. In Thailand, this is a popular pastime. Although they didn't win big, their belief in the special properties only grew stronger. Now people often visit the owners to absorb cosmic energy, and some are even thinking about making money from such relics. This cult of celestial stones shows how a natural phenomenon can turn into a mystical phenomenon, reflecting the longing for miracles and the desire to connect with the mysteries of the cosmos.
Метеоритные находки в гробницах.
2,000 years before the beginning of the Iron Age, the Egyptians had already learned to work with meteoritic iron. In ancient times, the sky was clearer, and our ancestors navigated by the stars and watched for falling meteorites. When meteors fell without burning up in the atmosphere, they became meteorites, cosmic stones. Scientists have confirmed that 3 small beads found in the tomb were used as jewelry in 3200 BC and were made from iron that came from meteorites. The ancient Egyptians drilled holes in it just as they did with other precious stones, and then made precious necklaces. Interestingly, meteorites were as valuable to them as precious stones and metals. Mars is 3.8 billion years old. In 2024, the Curiosity rover was moving toward a small crater about 9 meters in diameter, which scientists named Antofagasta. Organic substances and chemical traces from before life may be preserved in the rock. On the way, the rover stopped at a cliff and photographed it. On the surface, there is a texture of regular polygons that cover several meters in a row. They are all about the same size, all have a similar shape, like the scales of a giant creature. A NASA engineer published the photo. The agency reported, similar structures in Martian rock have been seen before, but never on this scale and with such clarity. Scientists explain it like this. Billions of years ago, Mars was a different planet. Rivers flowed across it, there were lakes and possibly entire seas. Wet silt settled at the bottom of bodies of water and gradually solidified. When clay rock dries after getting wet and then gets wet again and again, it cracks exactly like this. Perfect hexagons or polygons like mud at the bottom of a dried up puddle. Only here, it happened on a planetary scale over millions of years. Then Mars lost its water and atmosphere forever. And since then, this surface has remained untouched. There is no rain on Mars, no wind, at least not in the way we have it on Earth. And there is no life to dig everything up. What happened there 3 billion years ago is still there. Curiosity continued moving toward the Antofagasta crater. Scientists hope to find organic molecules there, carbon compounds that may indicate that chemical processes once took place on Mars, which under certain conditions could have led to the emergence of life. For now, this is only a hope. The results of the rock analysis in the crater will take several months. Curiosity has been operating on Mars since August 2012. During this time, it has traveled about 35 kilometers. That's about as much as a person walks in half a day. Every meter of the journey takes hours of work by engineers on Earth. And almost every few months, it sends a photo that baffles scientists. Here is one of those photos. Curiosity has been operating since 2012 and still amazes us. Over the entire time, the Curiosity rover has been working on Mars. That's more than 13 years. It has traveled about 35 kilometers. For comparison, an average person walks that distance in half a day, and yet almost every few months it sends a photo that baffles scientists. In the Illerød swamp in Denmark, 15,000 items have already been found, and scientists say that just as many still remain untouched in the ground. The Sahara necropolis in Egypt has been excavated less than halfway, and every year, new shafts with untouched seals are discovered there. Each of the finds in this video was made by accident. Someone took the wrong bone from the shelf, someone was digging a training trench, someone just strayed from the route. If you want to be the first to learn about such discoveries, subscribe and turn on notifications.